So what's the purpose of this webinar? I first want to introduce how personalization works in Adobe CQ5. It's kind of a broad topic, so there's a number of different things we could talk about, a number of different approaches. Next, kind of want to talk about how to choose the best approach for your particular project. Since there are, as in most things in CQ, multiple approaches, different ones will work better for you depending on your exact situation. Want to talk about best practices, and then any concerns or gotchas. These are sort of things that I've run across or people that I've worked with have run across through the course of their projects. So first, what do we mean about personalization? You should now see a slide about this. First, there's the idea of group versus individual personalization. So, personalization can mean anything from a custom website for a user, almost like your social communities, to grouping or segmentation of users. Most commonly, personalization in CQ is based on grouping or segmentation. So you're displaying specific content for users, but not necessarily, or specific content for segmented users, but not necessarily for individual users. So, say users between a certain age range in a certain geographic area. The next thing is dynamic or static personalization. So CQ supports both. You can either pre-bake all of your personalization, have different copies, or you can do it dynamically as the page loads, either server or client side. So that's one of the nice things about CQ is it offers options for both depending on your performance needs and your personalization needs. And then there's the question of personalization versus dynamic sites. So this presentation is primarily going to talk about personalization rather than the full-blown, dynamic website, more like your Facebook and Reddit and all that sort of thing. We're mostly talking about here delivering personalized content, but not necessarily a wholly social experience. So, like I said, there are multiple options. Live copy is one of the first ones. It's kind of a static option. Campaigns and teasers are another option that are built in and that provide, the ability to personalize content. And then there's some social components. That's just kind of a general categorization. I'm giving, a number of different components that are available inside of CQ. So generally, on most projects, you'll end up mixing and matching among these different options. Especially, between the either live copy and campaigns and teasers or social components in campaigns and teasers. Campaigns and teasers are very useful for personalization, but they work best when integrating with another option. So first, talk about live copy. So live copy is very similar to how the translation piece works. You create multiple copies of the content, and then you assign it configurable rollouts. This allows you to do things like rolling out on changes, doing an initial rollout where you just copy the content when the site's first set up and then you leave it alone. Starting workflows when changes are made, activating when changes are made. There's a whole bunch of different things you can do here that allow you to control how the content is copied between the different sites. In addition, you can roll out either sections of the site, the whole site, or even subtrees, and you can mix and match that way, which provides you a lot of power if you have different content structures. So real quick here, hopefully everybody can see my screen. Let's just take a look at live copy. So open up my CQ5 instance, and I have my test website, which is obviously very well filled out. So if I want to create a new live copy of any piece of content, so you can do this pretty much anywhere. You can do a whole site, you can do a subsection of site. I would go ahead and go to New, create live copy, fill out my title. And then you really should fill out the name as well. One of the kind of queer or odd quirks here is that if you don't, it just appends a number to the end, which is kind of odd. I select where I want to pull my live copy from, and then I can exclude subpages. Generally, you probably want to pull the whole thing. Now for the rollout configurations, you can choose multiple rollout configurations and mix and match. These are all controlled these are all controlled within the Etsy the tools dialogues, and we can create these, change them, whatever is needed. So I'll go ahead and select a standard rollout configuration. That one rolls it out the first time, and then push on modify. So now you can see I've got my new page here and my source page here. So live copy source, live copy target. Now this is where the live copy gets really powerful. If you go ahead and switch to live copy status, which we already are, you see that there's little boxes around everything. And from here, we can actually choose to unlink the inheritance from the source. So I can change the text here. And it won't affect the original source. Now then, on the other hand, if I want to change the source, so let's say I come in here and I say, oh, well, this is very verbose, I want to just cut it down. It'll go ahead and update my target. So you see now it's cut down here, but this isn't affected. So this is where live copy can be really powerful, and you can see how you could use it, especially when you're talking about kind of like geographic or very broad personalization. So one of the common things here is if you have multiple different jurisdictions that all have different legal requirements for, let's say a little blurb at the bottom for legal reasons. This is how you can do that pretty easily. So I did have a question about can we get a recorded video link at the end of the session? Yes, we will have a video available. It'll probably take about 24 hours. So that's live copy. Now, as for advantages, best performance by far. So live copy, you're creating separate pieces of content. They all can get cached in the dispatcher separately. You could have a completely cached but still personalized site using live copy. You have separate URLs, which can be an advantage. So let's say that your user wants to get content specific to the state of Ohio in the U.S. Your site, the URL on your website would reflect, US/Ohio, and that way they could always tell that they're on the right piece of content. It is created server side, and you don't have a ton of load that way. It also doesn't have any requirements on the user's browser, which is kind of nice for various reasons. It supports different content structures. So really commonly, you may have products that aren't available in one section of a country or in any sort of geographic location or group of people. You can trim that piece off, insert different sections in different places. It allows you to mix and match as needed. It's fairly easy to understand, largely because it's similar to localization. So it just works fairly well. You can have workflow set up and all that to make it easy for authors. Now, disadvantages. You can't do individual personalization with live copy. I'm sure that that's probably fairly obvious, but it does group personalization, but no individual personalization. You have to bake out too many different copies of content. And you can have SEO implications. The biggest one being that if Google picks up that you have 50 or 100 different copies of a page that are mostly identical, it will red flag you, and you'll have SEO issues. So when using live copy, you're going to have to keep SEO in mind, and generally what you're probably going to want to do is use canonical tags, which will have the root or the source of your live copy as the canonical root, so that when Google or whatever spiders your website, it will spider that particular location, and then you can handle users as they come in to direct them to the correct location. And it does require content maintenance. You could activate automatically. Generally speaking, you probably wouldn't, but either way, there's going to have to be some review and approval process to make sure that the content, as it's getting rolled out, is correct before it gets pushed live. So another option is campaigns and teasers. The advantage, they separate the static and dynamic content. So when you create a page, you create the static content, everything's going to be the same, and then you insert pieces of dynamic content into the page through the parses. They'll show that in a minute here. The content is included dynamically through JavaScript, and it's based on the user's segmentation. So, it'd say, okay, well, this particular piece of content is for users that are match these different things that are all available through JavaScript. And you can support multiple segments, mixing and matching, all sorts of rules. So this can be really powerful, especially if we're talking about like a marketing style website, to display really dynamic looking content so that everybody's got a personalized experience. So let's take a look at the campaigns and teasers real quick here. So in CQ5, you notice the Campaigns tab. This gets you to a dashboard of all of your campaigns, teasers, etc., and so forth. And you can see we do have some segments here. Now the segments are created, again, through the tools. You can browse through them through the Campaign Manager. And here's a really, really simple one I made, kind of embarrassingly so, that just does if true equals true. So obviously it's always going to be true. You can, of course, add all sorts of different components in here, and it'll just evaluate these components in JavaScript to determine whether or not the segment is matched. So you see, since this is green, the segment is matched. Now, one of the things that's really powerful about this, and you can kind of see this here, is that this is just a block that you can put arbitrary JavaScript in. So any property that's available inside of JavaScript, including in the user's profile, will be accessible here. So you can do all sorts of different evaluations here. You can make calls out even to evaluate things. So it's a very powerful tool. Now, once a segment is matched, it will go to the campaign, or sorry. When a segment's matched, the campaign teaser will be matched as well. So you can see here I created a brand, campaign, and teaser. These are all just really simple. Usually you'll probably have multiple campaigns per brand and multiple teasers per brand. You can see what they do in geometrics. That will give you a good idea. But inside the individual teaser, I can insert any piece of content I want. The caveat I would add is that you need to be a little careful when dealing with Flash in particular, and then anything that's got a good bit of JavaScript in it can also be problematic. Flash being problematic because it just overlays the whole section and you'll have trouble editing it. And then JavaScript, since this is included through JavaScript, you can have conflicts and problems there. But here we just have a really simple image. And then in our page properties for the teaser, you can see I select my segment. So you can, again, add multiple segments. So I could say, this is for, so the geometrics one, you see I have all these different segments here that I could add. I could add, winter male under 30, female over 30, and all of these are just different segments that are evaluated JavaScript based on the user's profile. I'll just leave this the way it is. So this one's always going to be true. No matter what, this particular one will always be matched. So if I go ahead and I go back into my website and I open up my teaser page, I can go ahead and add a teaser in here besides my statically created content. And that will allow me to dynamically show the correct content to users. So you have a couple options here. You can do it by first random or clickstream score, and it pretty much works the way you'd expect. So first matches the first one. You can reorder as needed. of course. Random will randomly show any that match. And then clickstream score allows you to show things that are more relevant based on their scores. So we'll just do first here. And I select my campaign path. You want to select the campaign, not the brand or teaser, otherwise it'll just display an error message. And then there you go. You see how it's pulled in that image and displayed it on the page. So, so you can pull in any different number of pieces of content. You could even do navigations through this, and we can show. I'll show a little bit about that later. So the advantages of campaigns and teasers. Everything is client-side for the most part. So there's not too much performance impact. You know, obviously when the dispatcher first fires up and it has to build these pages, there's going to be a little bit there, but it's not doing a whole bunch of evaluation on the client side. So I do see a question. Can we create a component which can behave similar to a teaser and assign a segment to it? I've seen editing even a normal component within a teaser. Have you seen that issue? Yeah, I mean, we could certainly create components that extend the teasers and allow you to do like nested teasers, you know, that would show up depending on your segmentation. That would certainly be possible. And you know, as for editing sections inside of a teaser, generally you probably want to just keep to the same idea that they have here, where you keep the content for the teasers outside and include it as needed. Okay, yeah, so as for problem editing normal components within teasers, yeah, you guess I've definitely seen problems that I kind of alluded to with JavaScript-based components where you know, the JavaScript will fail, and you really have to try to rely on client libraries as much as possible. One of the big problems with campaigns and teasers is because the content is included dynamically, the evaluation order of the JavaScript is really difficult to predict. So you really need to have something inside the teaser that kicks it off that says, you know, I'm ready to run. You can't rely on document.ready in particular. So back to the advantages. You can do group or segmentation, segment personalization, and you can kind of mock up individual personalization. So, you know, when a user submits a form on your website, you can use that to segment the users and personalize content to them. So you can say, you know, if you submit a form that says, I am female and I am from this location and I have all this, that data can be loaded into a user's context cloud and pulled out from there and used to segment the users. And it does provide a number of pre-built components in the interface, which you saw. This, of course, will change with CQ 5.6. You know, again, this is a big focus of Adobe's. They want to make this personalization work as well as possible. So we'll probably have another webinar for how to do this in 5.6. And then you can easily segment visitors. You know, you saw all the different segmentation rules that are available. Now, disadvantages. One of the biggest ones, like I said, is the interaction with component JavaScript. Especially on JavaScript-driven sites, it can really get problematic. Now, yeah, you can't easily do different content structures, which can be a problem if, you know, you had this sort of situation I was talking about where you'd have different products available in different areas. The personalized content is stored separately, which would be an issue potentially, you know, for authors to understand where the content on the page is coming from. So there's definitely some training that has to be done there. And it does require JavaScript. I think that's probably fairly obvious, but even though it's 2012, there's still people with browsers out there that either don't have JavaScript or it doesn't work very well. Unfortunate enough to locked into Internet Explorer. Now, I do another question here about the teasers. The personalization JavaScript needs to be loaded with each page request. And there could be a potential to slow down page load. Now, for page load, you should be able to leverage caching you may have an initial page load that would be significant, but once you cache it and you send the proper responses to the browser, you should be able to get a decent sized page or decent page load. One of the sites I'm going to show a little bit later on does use this for almost all their personalization, and the performance is acceptable. In fact, it's pretty darn good. There's a little flash, but the page loads pretty fast. And then as for segmentation side, there's definitely could be an issue if you have far too many segments, which is why, if we'll go back here and show it real quick. Which is why if you look at the segments that they create, on the wrong page. My apologies there, I was trying to find the right page here. If you look at the segments that are created, you can see that they combine them as much as possible, so that so that you're not storing a whole lot of information, because it is stored in cookies. Any other questions about this at all? I'll try to answer them as we get a little bit later on here, but try not to type too much as we go on. Okay. So the social components. Now this is just kind of a name that I'm giving a number of different components that are available inside of CQ5. They include the forms, the profile, and what you can use these for is to build a completely customized user experience. A profile with user interaction. And you can use the internal CQ users and groups. You can customize every little piece of content that's sent. And you can integrate with the social community, so the blogs, the cloud, all that sort of thing. So you can really create a powerful, individually personalized user experience with these components. The advantages, again, you can do group, or you could do individual personalization. There are some pre-built components. The caveat I would add here is that usually when you're trying to build this sort of individualized experience, you're probably going to want to extend at least, if not completely replace these components. But you can build it however which way you want and make it very, very customized. You can have significant user interaction, so you really could build that social network using the social components. And as I said, you can integrate with the collaboration tools. As for disadvantages, there's definitely a server load issue that can happen with the social components. You need to have a really good caching strategy, and generally I've found that it's a good idea to try to segment all of the traffic for these off onto one or a set of publishers, so that you're not going to have a potential issue where you could bring down the whole site if you get more load than you'd expect. Because the thing to keep in mind with the social components is because they work server-side, they're going to have some load for every request on the publisher, at least every request that utilizes the components. So, as much as possible using AJAX to try to keep pages actually static and just the content different, and then, utilizing caching heavily. There's definitely some complexity, and it pretty much will require custom development. Any questions at all with the various personalization options in CQ, or? Okay. So when you come to evaluating your needs, the first thing you want to think about is your level of personalization. Obviously, if you want to have individual personalization, you pretty much are going to have to utilize the social components. If you just need very broad personalization, I would highly encourage looking at live copy. It's a really light, easy to deploy option if you just need to do very general personalization. The next thing is performance. So performance is going to drive how much server load you can take is going to drive your choice here. Live copy, obviously, as much as possible would decrease your problem with performance. Whereas if you are able to support a heavy load, you could leverage the social components and campaigns and teasers. The level of customization you're willing to accept. Generally, live copy, that sort of thing, works pretty much the way you want out of the box. As you move down, you'll probably need to customize a lot more. And then do you want it to work client or server side? And the reason that I bring that up is, there's a lot of times there's compliance and regulatory needs where you need to be able to produce the page exactly the way it was for each segment. And in that case, you may not be able to utilize the social tools or the campaigns and teasers, just because of compliance and regulatory needs, especially if you have clients that are in the, or if you're in the, financial, healthcare sectors. It happens a lot. So, oh, good. Okay, so the client context. You'll get asked a question about, can you please give more detail about the role of the client context and personalization? So yeah, the client context is the center of personalizing with the campaigns and teasers. If I remember the keystroke correctly, which I'm not going to. So the client context is effectively a JavaScript repository of all of each user's individual properties. Appears like Firefox is not being very happy with me right now. And you can pull up the client context on any page at CQ if you remember the if you remember the key sequence. One second. Sorry, I'm having a bit of a brain fart at the moment. But it'll list out all of your options. That's really odd. Well, it seems like it's not working on this page. Yeah. Let me go ahead and open up geometrics and see if it works here. I apologize, this page is something I made individually, so it's probably got missing one of the dependencies, so you'll have to excuse me. All right, sorry for the delay there. Okay, so as you can see, the client context is pretty much all of your JavaScript variables that are made available inside of CQ. It's available as a JavaScript variable, so you can retrieve and push information in here. So, as I was talking about with the social components, as you submit forms, as you gather user data, you can push data in here and then retrieve it later. Now, when you're browsing the site, additionally, you can modify these things as needed. So if I wanted to change my keywords to Firefox, I don't know, Firefox and shoes, I can actually change, my options here, and it'll allow you to see the site as other users are seeing it, test out your segmentations, and make sure that things work the way they're supposed to. Now, the client context is also one of the big pieces that you'd use inside of your segmentation. So inside of a general segment, you'll probably leverage variables from the client context. This, for example, one stored in user properties. So I can check my gender, age, interest, country, etc., and so forth, and check them against a variable, and that way build out your segmentation. Make sure there's any other questions. Now, as for customizing the client context, generally I would just try to interact with it. I don't know about necessarily customizing. And one of the guys that's done a lot of work here with the segmentation's also on the line. So Brian, if you got any thoughts, I'd be glad to hear them.
Sure. I'm not really. I don't think I can see a whole lot of questions as they're coming through. So the question was, can you customize the client context? And the answer is yes. You can build your own client context store. It really comes with 4 or 5 out of the box. Actually, if you click, Dan, if you're able to go to your components here, you can click and drag the custom item. And actually go to your segment page.
Yep.
And then go to the your components in your sidekick there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do a user property, which is the last component.
Okay.
So you've got several. There's several context stores that you can deal with here. One of which is user, and so this is really going to handle. It's really designed to deal with any kind of demographic kind of information that's going to come from your user. This is where you would store, age, sex, birthday, anything that you would really know about that user as they're coming in. And typically this is going to come from maybe a logged-in state where that user's actually applied some information. On several implementations I've done for this, I've used really the location, because oftentimes when you're implementing your personalization, you really care about where that person is coming in. And so you will either use a geolocation server or something, or you're sniffing the person's IP address or what have you, to really get an indication of where they are when they start their surfing or their browsing on your website. And then you give them the option to kind of change, by zip code or whatever, and you're storing that person's location on this profile property, if that makes some sense.
Yep. So, and then there's another question too about using Site Catalyst to drive segmentation and show personalized data. Brian, have you done that? Or?
I've used, actually I implemented Site Catalyst at the same time as I was implementing personalization here. Yeah, you certainly can. I mean, I'm assuming that question is, I want to track my clicks, and based on where that user has gone, I want to show them specific things. And certainly you can do that. You just would essentially listen for the clicks through Site Catalyst, and based on that, you would write some specific JavaScript that's going to write to your client context, and your segments are really going to react based on that. So the way, without getting into super nerdy here, essentially you would have to just write whatever it is that you're trying, whatever your condition is in the client context, and then set up your segments surrounding that.
Right. Yeah, and you could, and there's a really actually kind of primitive one built in here too, where they detect whether or not you've been on certain segments of the site and react differently.
Sure.
With the geometrics outdoors.
In fact, there's a you'll see on the side of your sidekick there. There's something called script. Let's click and drag that guy and kind of look at it. What this allows you to do is basically enter any kind of JavaScript statements that you want, and so the segment will react based on that. So if you already are using some site catalyst and you're using some of maybe the classical amateur JavaScript statements, you can actually place them in here and have the segment react based on that right here.
Yep. Okay. Another question we have is, if I have a CRM with users and segments already, can I push my segment somehow without replicating everything inside of CQ?
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah.
So they're pushing their users into CQ?
Well, Clement, yeah, I think, could you follow up with that a little bit? I'm not...
My gut wants to say yes, and the reason why, but there's going to have to be some customization there, in so much as you'd have to translate whatever your segments mean now into the way that CQ understands what segments are.
Right. Well, and since CQ is a very RESTful based and very JavaScript based, you could certainly set something up where you make a call back to the server that gets maybe proxied through to your CRM that would return a JSON response of the data that you're looking for. Additionally, there's import and export options through CQ, but without knowing the exact circumstances, I think it sounds plausible, but it'd be hard to say for sure.
Right, and keep in mind that these segments are really just a logical set of rules.
Right.
Right. Show me, because you're assigning. I mean, just we're looking at here, essentially just a content page, just like anything else. It just happens to live in the Etsy segmentation. And really all it's doing is it looks at the logic that you're setting up within this parses, and you're attaching these segments to pages that live in your campaign section, right? So this is the logic. So as long as you've got that logic and we can map that, you can even map that directly into the script component that we're looking here on the screen. And it will, provided that logic makes sense to CQ in the confines of the client context, then everything should work. But without knowing, like Dan says, without knowing the specifics of your project, it's hard to say.
Okay. Any other questions at all, or? Okay. So let's see. Talk about evaluating your needs. So I think pretty much understand, as you evaluate your needs, you'll probably come to different decisions about what approach works best for you. But we can take a look at some real common solutions here. So unfortunately, live copy with it for geographic personalization, the site that I'd hope to show for that isn't quite live yet. But I think you can kind of understand how it would work, where you're using live copy to show different pieces of content depending on what area you're in. So, one of the examples I'd definitely show for using segmentation and campaigns and teasers for showing content would be Time Warner Cable. So they use CQ to segment out their content, and in fact, they're building, these navigations depending on your location. They're dynamically building the navigation so they can show the correct products. So I don't know if you saw when the page loads, but you can see that it loads up with a very simple content, and then you can see the campaign and teasers come in. You can see how, even though it's all through JavaScript, their performance is pretty acceptable, and you can see how again they're doing a lot of different marketing here through the campaigns and teasers and enabling a really dynamic look to the site.
What's interesting, this is Brian Oregon. What's interesting about this particular site is that there's very little content that actually lives on this page that isn't being delivered through teasers. And so one of the points that Dan was making earlier is that you're going to see a little bit of a performance hit because basically all your content's being evaluated client side. And so I know that things are a little laggy through the screen share here, but I think you'll get a decent indication of literally everything that we're looking at on this page, with the exception of the header, is being delivered through teasers. And they're delivered through individual teasers. So the slider here, the shop selector down below, and all the little widgets you see on this page are actually all being delivered individually through their own individual teasers.
Yeah, and you can see that one of the things that are brought up is for, if you disable JavaScript, there's definitely reduced functionality on the site. But as you can see here, they've done some thought around handling that situation and giving something useful. So, when you're creating a component or a site that relies heavily on campaigns and teasers for content, it's definitely one of the things you'll have to keep in mind is building out components that have reasonable fallbacks. Okay, so there's one question here. Does this mean all the content is delivered, but you resolve what must be displayed on the client side, or does this mean that you resolve what must be displayed, then request the correct content displayed? So yeah, it's definitely the second option. The first step is to resolve based on the segmentation what content should be displayed, and then to request that content through Ajax and pull it into the site. It's not pulling down everything and then choosing from there. Any other questions at all? Or? Yeah. And then another site that I'd show that utilizes the social components to build out a really personalized content is Shop Auto Week. This again is built in CQ, and they have the idea of a notebook. So if I log in to my notebook, I see cars that I've looked at and that I'm interested in. Maybe not a Land Rover, but as you can see here, this is tailored specifically to me. They want to have a buying experience that's specific to me. So it's cars with dealers near my area. I can do comparisons here, and all this is built, through different components that have been customized and that are running from the server. So if you see here, I click on a car here, say add it to my notebook. And when I go back to my notebook, I can see that I now have that Lexus there. Additionally, these similar vehicles are also pulled up in a similar way. It does searches against my cars and tries to find cars that are similar. So since I added the Lexus, now it's suggesting a Nissan and another Lexus. So that just kind of shows the power. Now for performance, I worked on this a long time ago, quite a while ago, and this is what I was talking about, where all of the content that's underneath a particular path is served up through one particular server, and then all the other contents through another set of servers, so that when there's additional load on the system, at the very least you'll be able to display the site. And then also, there's a whole lot of Ajax going on here to display this. This page itself is pretty much static. All this is being built out through Ajax. So common problems you'll run into with delivering personalized content. First one is performance. If the personalized content isn't done correctly, especially if you're relying on the social components, you can really have serious performance problems. On the flip side, you can also have problems with caching, where either you cache too aggressively or you don't cache enough, and if you cache too aggressively, you can serve up the wrong content to the wrong people. So being very careful about how you build your Apache rules and the dispatcher and that sort of thing is very important. JavaScript interactions are a big problem with campaigns and teasers. So like I said before, you want to try as much as possible to do things in the client libraries and then have little snippets of JavaScript to kick off your teaser. Brian, I don't know if you have any thoughts there around how you guys have done it. Or and then the last problem is data synchronization. So if you're doing synchronization, or if you're doing personalization through the social tools, you have to synchronize across servers. There's definitely tools built into CQ for that, but it's one of those problems that you'll have to make sure that you plan for carefully, because it will be a lot of data moving across the network. So that's pretty much it. If you have any other questions or anything, I'd be happy to stay on for a while. Otherwise, thank you very much for attending, and I hope you found the session very informative. And as I said, we'll make sure that a video of this is going to be available probably within about 24 hours. I need to get it transcoded out of the GoToWebinar format, and I'll get it posted up on the website and get an email out to everyone that attended. If there are any other questions, thank you very much, and I hope everyone has a good rest of the day. Oh, I do see one question here. Okay. So there's a question, is there specific optimization that must be done server-side when CQ has to store a lot of data related to user, like the notebook example you showed? And actually, it's yes. So to enable this sort of storage of user data, since this was actually a custom we had to hash the user name and generate a unique path so that we didn't run past the CQ's problem with having too many nodes inside of a single node. Additionally, there's just that server that it's running on has a lot of disk space and it's very fast. Well, thanks everyone, and if you'd like to reach myself or reach out to myself or TJ via email, we'd be glad to have. Sorry, I'm getting feedback. We'd be glad to answer any questions that you have. Thanks, and have a good day.